Not tonight, she said, her eyes glued to her tablet, making me feel as invisible as the dust motes dancing in the dim light. That phrase, not tonight, used to be a soft whisper, a gentle excuse wrapped in a tender kiss on the forehead, a promise of closeness deferred but not denied. It was a shared understanding, a quiet agreement between two people deeply connected. But tonight it was different. It was hollow, mechanical, devoid of any warmth or genuine regret. Like she was simply swiping away an annoying notification she had no intention of opening, dismissing it with the same casual indifference she'd give to a spam email. I lay there, staring at the ceiling for what felt like an eternity, the faint glow from her screen casting long, distorted shadows across the room. Then, slowly, almost reluctantly, I turned my head to the side. There she was, Mara, my wife, bathed in the cool blue luminescence of her tablet. Her legs were tucked comfortably beneath her, a posture of complete relaxation and absorption. Her eyes, usually so expressive when they met mine, were now flicking rapidly across whatever digital world held more allure than the man lying beside her. My hand, which a moment ago had rested hopefully on her hip, a silent plea for connection, quietly retracted. It felt like I was petting a beautifully sculpted statue that had, in that instant, turned to cold stone, unresponsive and lifeless under my touch. I didn't speak. I never do anymore. Not about this. The words felt pointless, like trying to shout into a void. Instead, I rolled onto my side, facing the cool, unyielding wall, my heartbeat thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, louder than I want to admit. A raw, primal drumbeat of hurt and confusion. My mind, ever the optimist, tried to rationalize it, to cushion the blow. She's tired. She's stressed. It's not about you. These were familiar refrains I'd chanted to myself countless times over the past few months, a desperate attempt to create a shield against the creeping dread. But my chest, heavy with an ache that radiated deep within, told the unvarnished truth. The bitterness, sharp and metallic, tasted at the back of my throat, a testament to unexpressed pain. The room, usually a sanctuary of warmth and shared intimacy, suddenly felt like a tomb, cold and suffocating. And the silence between us? It wasn't just quiet. It buzzed, a deafening hum, louder and more piercing than any scream could ever be. It was a sound of unspoken truths, of widening chasms, of two souls drifting irrevocably apart. We hadn't touched, not truly touched, in weeks. Each night, I tried, not aggressively, never pushy, just a soft reach, a tentative kiss to her shoulder, a whispered, "Hey, you still awake?" A small, hopeful gesture, an offering of connection. But every night, it was the same, of variations on a theme of rejection. Not tonight. Sometimes it came with a weary sigh, a subtle indication of inconvenience. Other times, it was accompanied by a dismissive pat on my hand, as if I were a child asking for too much candy before dinner, a nuisance to be gently placated. This time was different. I didn't even bother replying. The words caught in my throat, useless and heavy. I just stared at the textured drywall, blinking against the hot sting in my eyes, swallowing all whole the hurt, the frustration, the gnawing emptiness, just like I always did. It was my practice routine, a silent ritual of emotional suppression. She didn't notice, or maybe she did, and simply didn't care enough to acknowledge it. Her fingers kept tapping, scrolling, zooming in on whatever curated version of life she preferred to ours, to mine. And here's the kicker, the detail that twisted the knife deepest. She was smiling, that subtle, half-absent kind of smile, the one you don't fake when you're genuinely annoyed or truly tired. It wasn't a wide grin, not an overt display of joy, but was enough to pierce the fragile hope of someone who had just reached for her, longing to be wanted, to be seen, to be touched. Can you imagine that? Being in your own bed, reaching for the woman you married, the one you shared dreams with, built a life and routines with, and watching her light up more over a glowing screen in your very presence, your touch, your unspoken plea for intimacy? I lay there in the dark, staring at nothing, at the phantom shapes cast by the streetlights filtering through the blinds. And for the very first time, something shifted within me. I didn't feel hurt in the usual sense, not that raw, stinging pain of rejection. Instead, a strange, almost unsettling clarity washed over me. The fog of confusion, the haze of denial, it began to dissipate, leaving behind a stark, undeniable truth. Let me back up a bit, provide some context. My name's Derek. I'm 37 years old, and I've been married for 9 years to Mara. She's a tech consultant, a brilliant one, who, I've often observed, treats spreadsheets with more tenderness and attention than she does actual people. I, on the other hand, work in logistics. It's not a glamorous job, not sexy, as some might say, but it's steady, reliable, and it pays the bills, keeps a roof over our heads. Our house is a 3-bedroom colonial. Good bones, a solid structure, but lately, it feels like it's too much silence echoing within its walls. We have matching toothbrush holders in the bathroom, coordinated towels neatly folded, and a perfectly aligned spice rack in the kitchen. On paper, we are that couple. Grown up, stable, boring in all the right, respectable ways. The kind of couple people nod at approvingly, perhaps even a little enviously, on suburban block parties. Except, none of that matters anymore. Because here's the thing, the core truth had been gnawing at me. I spent the last 6 months, perhaps even longer, desperately trying to keep something alive that, in retrospect, has been dead for a very long time. I was resuscitating a corpse, breathing artificial life into a relationship that had already flatlined. And tonight, that casual, dismissive "not tonight" wasn't just another rejection. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown. And I was done playing defense, done absorbing the blows, done making excuses for the growing void between us. Tomorrow I won't say a word. I won't confront her, won't beg, won't plead for attention or affection. But I've made a decision. A quiet, firm, unyielding decision. I'm going to take everything she's given me, all the silence, all the avoidance, all the passive power plays, the thinly veiled contempt, and I'm going to build a plan out of it. A plan that is cold, quiet, and utterly controlled. Because if she thinks she's in charge of this collapse, if she believes she holds all the cards in this slow-motion disintegration, then she hasn't met the version of me that's done pretending, done being the passive, understanding husband. So buckle in. This wasn't the explosion. This was just the first, almost imperceptible, crack in the foundation. The real story, my story, was about to begin. The next morning, I was woken not by an alarm, but by a sound. Humming. I lay still for a moment, letting it seep in. Mara was humming in the kitchen. She always hums when she's in a genuinely good mood, when a project lands, or when she's just content. It's a sound I use to treasure, a barometer of our shared happiness. But this morning, after the cold vacuum of last night, it felt different. It felt like a betrayal. It was bright, upbeat, something light and airy. It was the sound of a person completely untroubled, a person for whom the previous 12 hours hadn't happened at all. It was the sound of a woman who hadn't just silently, mechanically rejected her husband. It was confirmation. Last night, in that cold clarity, I'd made a decision. This morning, her humming cemented it. She wasn't just oblivious. She was in a different world entirely. A world where I, clearly, was no longer a main character. I listened from the hallway for a second, my back against the wall, arms folded. I tried to decipher the tune, but it didn't matter. It was happy. And it wasn't for me. I didn't recognize the man she was smiling for anymore. But it sure as hell wasn't the one standing in the shadows of his own home. Taking a slow breath, I pushed off the wall and stepped into the kitchen. The morning light was streaming in, catching the steam rising from the coffee pot. It looked like a page from a catalog. Perfect home, perfect life. Mara was there, pouring coffee into her favorite striped mug, the one she'd had since college. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, and she was wearing that oatmeal-colored cashmere sweater she swore was her thinking armor. Today, it just looked like a costume. She glanced up as I entered, as if I had just wandered in from a morning jog. Not from the shared bed she had turned into a frigid no-man's land just hours ago. "Oh, morning," she said brightly. Her voice was cheerful, rested, like she wasn't still carrying the weight of her tablet-lit silence, like I wasn't still carrying it. Guess who finally got the promotion? Jasmine. She totally deserves it. Honestly, I mean, she works like an absolute beast. Remember I told you about that niche project she salvaged? She paused, holding her mug, waiting for me to smile, to clap, to engage in the office politics of life I felt increasingly divorced from. She was waiting for the old Derek, the one who would put his own feelings aside to celebrate her world. I didn't give him to her. Nice. I muttered. I brushed past her. The smell of her floral shampoo was strange, unwelcome perfume in the air. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water from the tap. My voice came out low, clipped, devoid of any inflection. I didn't mean for it to sound that cold, but I didn't stop it, either. Let her notice. Let her feel it, if she still could. Let her feel something related to me. Her smile faltered. Just slightly, just at the edges, but I saw it. The brightness in her eyes dimmed by a fraction. It was the first time in months I'd seen her genuinely confused by me. Then, the classic save. She swirled her coffee, looking thoughtful, trying to fill the void I'd just created. She's been with the company forever, Mara continued, her voice a little less buoyant. And I've got work. I cut her off. Clean. Sharp. I rinsed my glass and placed it in the sink, perhaps with a little more force than necessary. The sharp clack of glass on stainless steel cut through her sentence, and the silence that followed was heavy. I didn't wait for her reply. I didn't look at her face. I just turned and headed for my home office, closing the door behind me. I heard her start to say my name, Derek, but the latch clicked shut, sealing it off. That door felt like a vault, locking me inside, sealing her out, preserving the last bit of myself she hadn't managed to erode. Inside, the walls were quiet. This silence was different from the one in the bedroom. That one was imposed, a weapon used against me. This one was chosen. It was a refuge. My laptop hummed to life. Outlook buzzed, a red bubble of unread messages demanding attention. Shipments to track, invoices to prove, a supply chain problem in Singapore. None of it registered. I sat at my desk and stared, not at the screen, but through it, past it, into places in my mind where her voice used to echo in softer, slower tones. Before everything got so sterile and structured, before our love got laminated, preserved under a glossy, impenetrable surface, I thought back to simpler mornings. Mornings years ago, when she'd slide in beside me on this very couch. Back when this room was a den, not my fortress. She'd be in pajama shorts, hair a total mess from sleep, her head resting on my shoulder as she scrolled through Zillow listings just for fun. It was our Sunday ritual. "Look at this one in Vermont," she'd whisper, her voice warm with sleep and dreams. A-frame, floor-to-ceiling windows. We could grow old here. Derek, just us and the trees. Back then, I believed her. I saw it all. I saw us old, gray, still holding hands, the windows fogged up from the winter cold. And just as that memory solidified, just as the ache of it began to bloom in my chest, I heard her laugh from the kitchen. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was a full, unrestrained laugh, the kind she used to share with me. She was on the phone now, probably Jasmine, probably reliving office politics, rehashing promotion, planning coffee dates I wouldn't be invited to and wouldn't want to attend. That sound, her laugh, it used to be my favorite sound in the world. It had a brightness to it, a clear, ringing quality, like wind chimes on a balcony in spring. It was the sound of my home. But now it grated. Now, it sounded like something preserved in a glass jar. Beautiful, yes, but unreachable. Something to be looked at, admired from a distance, but never again held. It was a laugh that had nothing to do with me. I minimized my inbox, opened a blank Word document. The white screen stared back, as empty as I felt. I typed nothing. And I realized, with that same cold clarity from last night, that I wasn't angry. Not really. That was the terrifying part. The hurt was there, deep down, a fossilized thing. But on the surface, I was calculating. This house, this life, it felt like a set, like someone had meticulously built a fake home to trick a man into staying put, into believing the play was real. Everything was in its place. The fridge magnets from our trips to Asheville and Portland. A gallery wall in the hall with smiling, professionally photographed faces of us. The expensive throw blankets draped just so over the arms of the sofa. But the energy was plastic. It was a stage, and she was the lead actress, and I had just been demoted to a stagehand she barely noticed. That morning, sitting in the silence of my office, I made a quiet decision. This wasn't a revenge plot, not some dramatic movie of the week outburst. It was simpler. It was this: I'm done reacting. I'm done being the one who waits, who reaches, who hopes. She wanted a version of me that didn't need her, that didn't bother her, that stayed on his side of the bed. Fine, she can have him. I would become the man she couldn't read, the one she couldn't predict, the one she couldn't just handle with a bright good morning and news about Jasmine. She wanted a ghost? I'll be a ghost, a quiet, observant, calculating ghost. And we'll see how much she enjoys humming when she's living in a house that's truly haunted. The gym always had the strange, sterile quiet in the middle of a weekday afternoon. It was a pocket of suspended time, a void between the morning rush of the get-it-in-before-work crowd and the evening crush of the burn-off-the-day regulars. In this 3 p.m. lull, there was just the occasional heavy thud of weights hitting the rubber mats, the soft, rhythmic squeal of sneakers on polished floors, and the steady, ambient hum of the overhead fan circulating air that smelled of cleaning solution and faint metallic sweat. I liked it. I needed it. It was the only place left in my life that didn't expect anything from me, that didn't judge me with silence. Here, the silence was part of the contract. You were here to work, to push, to feel something physical and real. The iron didn't care about my marriage. The treadmill didn't ask me why I looked so tired. It was pure, unadulterated effort, a place where pain was productive, where a heavy weight in my chest could be temporarily replaced by a heavy weight in my hands. I hadn't planned on talking to anyone that day. My plan, as it was to just lift heavy things until my muscles screamed, to feel my blood pound against something other than the hollow ache of heartache and the creeping, cold precision that was settling over me. I wanted to exhaust a man who had laid in bed staring at the wall, and maybe build a new one. But as I dropped down onto the bench press, lining up my knuckles with the knurling on the bar, I heard that familiar voice behind me. "Thought you disappeared off the face of the earth," said Miles, clapping me on the back hard enough to make me grunt. He was the kind of friend who didn't need an invitation. He just materialized. Tall, easygoing, with a perpetually amused glint in his eye. Miles was a guy who always wore the same beat-up Ohio State hoodie, like it was a piece of essential armor. We hadn't seen much of each other since before the pandemic changed everyone's routines, but we'd known each other since high school, since we were all stupid haircuts and unearned confidence. He knew the version of me that existed before Mara, before the Colonial House, before the laminated love. Still here, I grunted, positioning the barbell over my chest, focusing on the ceiling tiles above. He gave a mock-serious nod, his eyes scanning my face. "Good. 'Cause you've got that man on the verge face. I've seen it before. Usually means a guy is about to quit his job and move to Alaska, or he's about to burn something important to the ground. Honestly, I'm betting on the fire." I couldn't help it. One corner of my mouth twitched up, a ghost of a smile. He always had the timing. "Just working," I said, pushing the weight up, my breath hissing out. "Bullshit," he said, not unkindly. He didn't offer the spot. He just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. After my set, I sat up, the blood rushing in my ears. We moved the rowers, side by side, pulling in a companionable, rhythmic silence for a few minutes. The whir of the flywheels filled the space between us. A couple rounds and Miles slowed his pace, and I followed suit. He tossed me a towel, leaned back on the bench beside me, his long legs stretched out. "You all right, man?" It was a question asked 1,000 times between men who rarely, if ever, actually mean it. It's code for hey, or what's up? But this time, he said it quiet, solid. He held my gaze like he knew, or at least suspected, that I might actually answer. And in that moment, the facade I'd been holding up in my office, in my kitchen, in my life, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. I stared down at the black floor mats, at the scuff marks left by 100 other people. What was I supposed to say? How do you tell your oldest friend that your wife finds you repulsive? That the woman you built your entire adult life around can't stand your touch? It's Mara, I said, the words feeling thick and foreign on my tongue, like I was speaking a language I'd forgotten. He didn't laugh, didn't flinch. He just waited, his expression unchanged. "She won't touch me," I said. The admission hung in the air, raw and humiliating. "I mean, at all." I finally looked at him. "It's been months, Miles. Months." I let out a breath. I didn't even know I was holding a ragged, shaky thing. At first I thought, stress, work, whatever. I made excuses for her. I told myself it was a phase, that it wasn't about me. But now I don't even feel like her husband anymore. I feel like her roommate. No, I corrected, the metallic taste from last night returning. Less than that, I'm just furniture. Something she has to navigate around to get to her tablet. Miles let out a long, slow breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "Damn, Derek. Months? That's brutal, man. That's not a phase. That's a blockade." I nodded slowly, looking back at the floor. Just saying it out loud felt like a dam breaking. Every night, I continued, the voice barely mine, I reach for her, or I used to, and every night it's the same rejection. Not tonight. A sigh, a pat on the hand. Like I'm a pest, and she's humming in the kitchen, man. She's smiling at her phone. She's living this whole other life, and I'm just there. "Damn," he said again, quieter this time. He leaned forward, lacing his fingers together, his gaze intense. "Listen," he said, "I'm not Dr. Phil, and I'm definitely not a marriage counselor. but I've been around. And a woman doesn't just stop. Not like that. Not for months. Not when she's still humming. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You're living in this fog, man. You're guessing. You're making up excuses for her. She's tired. She's stressed. What if she's just checked out? Or worse, checked in somewhere else? My head snapped up. What are you saying? He shrugged, holding his hands up. I'm just saying, you're shadowboxing. You're fighting an enemy you can't even see. Nothing crazy. But maybe you test her loyalty. Test her? Just poke the bubble, he said, his voice dropping. See what pops. You can't fix a problem if you don't know what the problem is. Right now, you're the only one in pain. You're the one staring at the drywall. She's scrolling and smiling. Does that seem fair to you? I let that sit in the air for a second. Test her loyalty. The idea didn't feel foreign. It didn't feel shocking or wrong. It felt like a key. It felt like something I'd already been circling deep down in that cold, calculating part of my mind that had woken up in the office. I had just been waiting for someone to give it a name, to give me permission. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being logical. This was the next step in the plan I hadn't even realized I was forming. I sat in the gym parking lot for 20 minutes, the engine off, the air in the car growing stale. I didn't drive home. I pulled out my phone. My fingers, which had been trembling with adrenaline and shame a few minutes ago, were now perfectly steady. I wasn't searching for how to fix my marriage. I was searching for best cell phone monitoring apps. The precision I'd felt in my office was back, sharper now. It had a target. That night, our bedroom was a stage set for the same play. Mara, in her oatmeal sweater, reading on her tablet. Me, lying beside her, pretending to read a book. The silence was the same, but to me, it felt different. It was charged. It was a before. I didn't reach for her. I didn't whisper good night. I just turned off my lamp, rolled over, and waited. I watched her fall asleep. I watched the tablet finally tip forward onto her chest, her hand going limp beside it. I watched her mouth fall slightly open, and I waited longer. I waited until I was sure, until her breathing had settled into that slow, deep, unguarded rhythm of true sleep. Then I moved. My fingers were steady, cold, even, like someone performing a routine medical procedure, detached and focused. I reached over her, my arm brushing duvet, every nerve ending screaming. I lifted her phone from a nightstand. The weight of it felt immense, like I was stealing fire from the gods. I slid out of bed and took it to the bathroom, locking the door without making a sound. The pale moonlight, coming through the small window, was just enough. The app I'd researched, the one I bought and downloaded onto my own device, blinked to life on her screen. SyncGuard, it was called. It promised real-time data sync, quiet installation, total stealth, a ghost in her machine. My thumbprint, which she'd added her phone years ago, in case of emergency, was the only key I needed. Her phone unlocked. My heart was a hammer against my ribs, but my hands were rock solid. Install. Trust certificate. Hide icon. The progress bar was a thin blue line that seemed to take a lifetime. 30 seconds. 45. I heard her shift in bed, a soft groan. I froze, my blood turned into ice. But her breathing just settled back into its rhythm. 90 seconds. Install complete. The icon vanished, disguising itself as a system utility in a folder she'd never opened. It was done. I didn't know if it would work. I didn't even know what I was hoping to find. Or maybe I did. Maybe I was hoping to find nothing, to be proven a paranoid fool. Or maybe I was hoping to find everything, to finally have a reason for the cold tomb our marriage had become. I slid the phone back into its place on the nightstand, plugging the charger, aligning it to the exact angle it was before. Without so much as a whisper, I got back into bed, pulling the covers up. Then, I turned to stare at the ceiling. The numbness wasn't sadness. It wasn't jealousy. It was precision. It was a chilling, calm focus of a man who finally had a mission. I wasn't her husband anymore, not in the way that mattered. I was her mirror, and if she was hiding something in the dark, she was about to meet the version of me that was built to uncover it. I wasn't just reflecting her silence. I was a two-way mirror, and I was on the other side, watching, waiting, and I would see everything. The entire next day was a special kind of hell. It was a torture of anticipation. I woke up before she did, my hand instinctively checking my own phone, which I'd left on the charger across the room. The screen was dark. The sync app, SyncGuard, was silent. I'd set it to silent notifications, of course. I was an amateur, but I'd been hoping to wake up to something, either the blank void of nothing, proving my paranoia, or the stark, black and white evidence that would finally let me off the hook of my own sanity. Instead, I got limbo. Mara woke up, stretched, and went through her morning routine with the same breezy, untroubled air as the day before. The humming was back, quieter this time, more of an absent-minded hum. She was in her thinking armor sweater again. She saw me in the kitchen, offered a tight, polite smile, a clear step down from yesterday's brightness, a cautious reaction to my coldness. "Morning," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Coffee's on." "Thanks," I replied, matching her tone. We moved around each other in the kitchen with a practiced, awkward choreography of two people who knew the steps but had forgotten the music. Every time my phone buzzed on the counter, my entire nervous system would light on fire. Buzz. My head snapped toward it. Mara glanced at me, one eyebrow slightly raised. I picked it up, my thumb shaking just a fraction. "Miles, you good man? You were weird yesterday." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Just Miles," I said, more to myself than to her. I typed back, "Yeah, fine. Just tired." I put the phone down, face down. Buzz. Again the jolt, like a small, targeted electric shock. I grabbed it. Outlook. Canceled. Logistics sync. 10 a.m. "Everything okay?" Mara asked, sipping her coffee, her eyes watching me over the rim of her striped mug. "Just work," I said, sliding the phone into my pocket. "Gotta get started." I retreated to my office, closing the door, the vault. But the vault was no longer a refuge. It was a cell. I spent the entire day in a fog of uselessness. I'd open a spreadsheet, stare at the numbers, and all I could see was that blue installation progress bar from last night. I'd open my email, read the same sentence 4 times, and the only words that registered were syncing data. I kept my phone on the desk beside me, a dark, silent monolith. The trickle began around 11 a.m. A notification from the SyncGuard app. I clicked it open so fast, I nearly dropped the phone. New data sync from Mara's iPhone. My heart hammered. I opened the mirrored interface. It was a group chat with her coworkers. Jasmine, someone named Ben, and a few others. Jasmine, "OMG, can we talk about that client call?" What a disaster. Ben, he didn't understand the niche targeting at all. Mara, he just likes to hear himself talk. I tuned him out and planned my weekend. I scrolled and scrolled. Nothing. Just work chatter. Annoying, banal, everyday work chatter. Then a new thread. Her sister. Sister. "Hey, found that chicken recipe you wanted. Mara, you're a lifesaver. Derek is so picky. Maybe this will shut him up." My stomach tightened at the casual cruelty, the emoji feeling like a tiny poison dart. But still, it wasn't what I was looking for. A promo code for yoga leggings. A reminder from her dentist. For a moment, I felt a wave of profound, sickening guilt. Miles was wrong. I was wrong. I was the monster. I was the one who had violated her privacy, broken that sacred trust, all because I was lonely and insecure. She wasn't cheating. She was just annoyed with me. She was just living her life. The cold, mechanical, "not tonight" wasn't a rejection of me for someone else. It was just a rejection of me. And honestly, which was worse, I felt sick. I tried to work. I really did. I answered 3 emails. I moved some numbers on a spreadsheet. But the house was too quiet, and then too loud. I could hear her on a Zoom call in her own office down the hall. Her work voice. Bright, confident, articulate. The voice of a woman who had her shit together. By 5 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore. The walls were closing in. I felt like I was suffocating on my own suspicion and guilt. "I'm going to the store." I called out, grabbing my keys. "We don't need anything," she replied from her office. "We need milk," I lied. "I got milk yesterday." "Oh, well, I'm going anyway," I said and fled. The next evening, because I'd been driving, just driving, for over an hour, ending up in the parking lot of a grocery store I didn't even normally go to, the app finally delivered. I was sitting alone in my car. Engine off. The last rays of the sun were painting the strip mall in a depressing gray-blue light. My phone, which had been silent for the last hour, buzzed in my lap. A real buzz. A SyncGuard notification. I stared at it. I didn't want to open it. I wanted to throw the phone out the window, drive home, apologize to Mara for being a paranoid asshole, and beg her to go to therapy with me. But I couldn't. I had to know. My fingers, steady again, this time with a grim sense of finality, opened the app. New data sync from Mara's iPhone. Her messages had synced. Her entire digital soul mirrored on my screen like a last will and testament she didn't know she'd written. The first few texts were the same ones I'd seen before. The work chat, the recipe from her sister, the yoga promo. My stomach churned with that same guilt. I was a terrible person. I was crazy. But then I scrolled further down, past the dentist reminder, past a group chat for a spin class, and I saw the name. Corey, not a last name, not a profile picture, just Corey. A simple, 5-letter name that landed in my gut like a lead weight. It was a name I'd never heard. It wasn't a Ben or a Jasmine. It was just Corey. And right away, my chest went still. That hollow, breathless, vacuum-seal feeling. My thumb hovered over the thread. This is it, the point of no return. I clicked. The first message, from 1:15 p.m. today, was from him. Him, missed our little lunch escape today. Don't make me wait until next week. The winky face. That fucking winky face. It seemed to leap off the screen, mocking me. Little lunch escape. So casual. So practiced. I held my breath and scrolled up to her reply. From 1:16 p.m. Mara, I needed a break, too. You're bad for my schedule, but good for my stress. I thought back to 1:16 p.m. I'd been staring at a spreadsheet, drowning in guilt. She'd been flirting, bantering, using a line that sounded like it belonged in a romantic comedy, not in my life. The air in the car thickened, became hard to breathe. I scrolled, my mind entering that state of detached clarity, that high-focus, low-emotion state of pure clinical observation. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was an editor. I was an investigator, reviewing someone else's screenplay. Him, yesterday you were amazing. Still thinking about it. Mara, yesterday you're not so bad yourself, but you still talk too much. Him, yesterday you know you love it. Room 237 again tonight. Mara, yesterday you always pick the coldest spots. Him, yesterday Corey you warm it up, babe. Babe. The word vibrated in my skull. She hadn't called me babe in, I couldn't remember. Years. My fingers didn't tremble. I wasn't angry. I was awake. For the first time in months, the heavy, suffocating fog that had clouded my every thought simply evaporated. All the confusion, all the self-doubt, all the double-guessing, all the nights I'd spent analyzing her sighs and her silences gone. In its place was a quiet, vibrating, ice-cold certainty. She was cheating, and not emotionally, not vaguely, not a one-time mistake. This was physical, intentional, routine. Again tonight. This was a scheduled part of her life, and she hadn't slipped. She hadn't broken down crying, or left atypical clues in the laundry, or come home smelling of a man's cologne. No, she had built this lie like a second home. A well-decorated, fully furnished, lived-in second home, complete with inside jokes, pet names, and backup chargers. She was commuting between two lives, and I was a boring, reliable suburb she left every day. I leaned my head back against the headrest, staring up at the stained fabric roof of my car, and I smiled. A small, thin, humorless smile. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. It hurt in a place so deep I didn't have a name for it, a foundational crack. But I smiled because finally, I had something real. I wasn't shadowboxing anymore. I wasn't fighting the phantom of stress or tiredness. I had a name. Corey. I had a place. Room 237. I had evidence. And more importantly, I had purpose. All the night she made me feel invisible, unwanted, less than. It wasn't because I was failing. It was because she was lying. Buzz. My phone vibrated in my hand. A new message. Live. Right now. From Corey. My screen lit up with it. He'd sent a picture. A selfie. Him. Sitting at a hotel bar, a glass of dark liquor in his hand. Smirking. Handsome in that generic, guy from a watch ad way. The text beneath it read, "Waiting for you." I sat there, frozen, watching the 3 little dots appear and disappear as Mara typed a reply. Mara, wrapping up a Zoom call. Be there in 20. Order me a wine? She sent a single heart emoji. I knew exactly where she was. She was at home, in her office, not on a Zoom call. She was packing her purse. She was probably checking her makeup in the hallway mirror. And in a minute, she would walk out, maybe yell just running out for a bit. And she'd goad him. She wasn't even trying to be clever. And maybe that's what stung the most. She didn't see me as a threat. She didn't see me as an equal or even an obstacle. She saw me as a placeholder. Furniture. Something that wouldn't move unless pushed. A known quantity. A solved problem. But I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. That's the mistake most men make. They get this information, and they rage. They blow it all up. They go home, wave the phone in their partner's face, demand explanations, demand apologies. They give the other person the power to lie, to cry, to flip the script. No, I've always been better with plans. I've always been a logistics guy, the one who sees the entire supply chain from start to finish. I put my phone down, the screen going dark. I took a slow, deep breath, the first one that felt like it had actually reached my lungs all day. I watched the reflection of the grocery store's neon sign dance across the windshield. It wasn't a random pattern. It was drawing blueprints. She had no idea. She thought she was the one in control, the one with the secrets. She thought she'd won. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of my quiet revenge. Friday night, 6:18 p.m. The house was quiet, wrapped in the soft, fading light of a November evening. I was in the hallway, leaning against the doorframe, sipping a glass of Cabernet. The wine was robust, earthy, a stark contrast to the sterile unreality that had become my life. I was standing in shadow, a deliberate choice, watching the scene unfold in our bedroom. Mara was at the mirror, not the bathroom mirror, but the full-length one by her dresser, the one she used when she was crafting a specific look. She was adjusting a single, silver earring, a delicate, modern-looking thing I had never seen before. It dangled, catching the lamplight, drawing attention to the curve of her neck. Nothing flashy, nothing overt, just enough to say, I put in effort. She smoothed her blouse. It was silk, a deep teal color that made her skin look like porcelain. It wasn't a work blouse. A work blouse was a crisp, button-down cotton. A work blouse was thinking armor. This was different. This was a blouse designed to be touched. She smiled at her reflection, a quick, practiced lift of the corners of her mouth. It was the same smile she used at networking events or when charming a new client. It was a mass of professional warmth. And tonight, it was aimed at someone else. Then, the perfume hit. It drifted out of the bedroom, cutting through the neutral scent of the house. It was sharp and floral, with a heavy note of jasmine or gardenia. It was complex, expensive, and completely, utterly unfamiliar. It wasn't the light, citrusy scent she'd worn for years. It wasn't the us scent. This was a scent chosen for a different audience, a different purpose. It was an olfactory announcement that this night did not belong to me. I stood there, a ghost in my own home, swirling the wine in my glass, unnoticed. My heart wasn't pounding. My hands weren't shaking. I was just observing, collecting data points. The new earring, the silk blouse, the unfamiliar perfume. You look nice, I said. My voice was calm, even carrying easily into the bedroom. It felt like the kind of thing a husband should say. She turned, startled, her hand flying to her chest in a small, guilty gesture. Her eyes were wide for just a second, the look of someone caught mid-thought, pulled from fantasy. Then the mask was back in place. She gave me that tight-lipped, efficient smile. Oh, thanks, she said, turning back to the mirror to grab her purse. Work dinner thing. It's with the exec team and that new VP from the London office. Going to be dreadfully boring, all shop talk and bad wine. Don't wait up. Work dinner. The same coworkers she barely liked, the ones who, according to her just last week, were too corporate and full of performative drama. But now, suddenly, they warranted a Friday night, a silk blouse, and a brand new perfume. I knew, with the cold certainty of a man reading a spreadsheet, that she was lying. I knew from the SyncGuard app on my phone that there was no London VP. There was just Corey. There was no dreadfully boring shop talk. There was a hotel room key. I didn't argue. I didn't challenge. I didn't even blink. I was the furniture, remember? Furniture doesn't ask questions. I raised my glass from the shadows of the hallway. Well, have fun, I said, my voice laced with supportive warmth that must have felt like ice water. Knock em dead. She paused. Her hand was on her purse, but she stopped just for a fraction of a second. A flicker of something moved behind her eyes. It wasn't just hesitation. It wasn't just guilt. It was confusion. I saw it clearly. She had been expecting the sullen, passive Derek, the one who would have mumbled, okay, and shuffled away. She was prepared for my resentment. It's what would have validated her decision to seek comfort elsewhere. She was not prepared for this pleasant, detached, supportive husband. My normalcy was a curveball. It made her the unstable one in the equation. It made her, for just a second, doubt her own script. Then, the moment passed. She composed herself. Right. Well, I'll see you later. See you later. I echoed, taking another sip of wine. She walked out the door, her heels clicking down the hardwood steps. The sound was sharp, decisive, like punctuation at the end of a sentence I'd already finished reading. I listened as the front door opened, then closed. I heard the car engine turn over, the sound muffled by the garage. Then, the rumble as it pulled away, fading down the street until it was gone. The house settled into a profound silence. It was no longer the buzzing, heavy silence of rejection. It was my silence. A clean, empty, operational silence. I waited. I waited exactly 10 minutes. It was a precise, controlled act. I wasn't an anxious husband, desperately checking on his wife. I was a scientist, giving the specimen time to reach the petri dish. In those 10 minutes, I walked to the kitchen and refilled my glass. I stood at the sink, looking out at the dark backyard. I felt nothing. No rage, no tears. Just a quiet, humming clarity. At 6:42 p.m., I pulled out my phone. I opened the SyncGuard app. Her location pinged. As I expected, she wasn't at the boring downtown steakhouse where the execs usually met. Her blue was at the Anchor Bar and Grill, a forgettable, slightly grimy place over on the industrial side of town. A perfect, unverifiable alibi location. The dot sat there for exactly 7 minutes, just long enough to anchor the alibi. Maybe even send a quick, just got here, text to a decoy group chat. And then by 7:05 p.m., it began to move. I watched it, a god in the machine, tracing her path in real time. Eastbound on the main thoroughfare, a right turn onto the waterfront access road. It wasn't the most discreet hotel she and Corey favored, but I suppose discretion doesn't matter when you assume the other person is still asleep at the wheel, convinced you're just tired, stressed, or not in the mood. It stopped. It settled over a large building on the water. The Grand View Hotel, the place I'd taken her for our 5th anniversary dinner, the one with the sweeping views and the overpriced champagne. The irony was so thick, it was almost boring. I didn't follow her. I didn't call. I didn't cry. I poured another glass of wine and walked through the house, seeing it now with a different set of eyes. It wasn't a home. It was a stage, littered with props from a play that had closed. The neutral tone walls, the frame quotes about gratitude and laughter, the throw pillows on the couch, embroidered with hand-stitched, hollow words. Home. Together. All of it curated. All of it fake. Tonight, the stage was mine, and I was finally the one holding the script. I took a seat at the dining table, the one we never use, its polished with surface cold and smooth. I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen lit my face. I created a new, password-protected, encrypted file. I opened a blank spreadsheet. I titled it simply Details. I began to build my case, my mind working with the detached efficiency of a logistician. Column A, date. Column B, time. Column C, alibi provided. Column D, actual location. Column E, contact. Column F, evidence. I began to type. Row 1, Friday, November 5th, 6:30 p.m. Work dinner thing, London VP. The Grand View Hotel. Corey. Screenshots of room 237, texts. Screenshot of live location ping. I uploaded the files from my car. I took a new screenshot of map showing her stationary and accusing at the hotel. I attached it. This wasn't just proof. This was leverage. This was power. This was a balance sheet. And I was meticulously logging every one of her debts. At 9:43 p.m., I refreshed the location again. Still there. I imagined her laughter, the real, unguarded kind she hadn't used with me in months, echoing off the generic wallpaper room 237. I imagined Corey's cologne hanging in the air. I imagined a bottle of wine, the same kind she called boring with me, chilling on the desk. The betrayal no longer lived in my imagination. It had coordinates. It had timestamps. It had a name. I took a deep, slow breath and leaned back in my chair, the laptop humming in the silent room. Strangely, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. I felt focused. This wasn't heartbreak. This was strategy. She'd think she still held the upper hand, that I was still the sad, passive man who muttered, have fun, while she walked out the door to her lover. But all she'd done was give me clarity. She'd given me a purpose. And clarity is a very, very dangerous thing, especially when it's quiet. Saturday morning. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor like nothing had changed, like it wasn't illuminating the scene of crime. I heard her before I saw her. Mara was at the counter, her back to me, and she was humming again. That hum. Yesterday, it had been a betrayal. This morning, after reading the transcripts from room 237, it was something else entirely. It was a victory lap. It was a carefree, satisfied sound of a woman who had just spent a night being worshipped, a woman who believed she had successfully managed every aspect of her life. Her career, her lover, and her sad, predictable husband. It was a sound of someone who had outrun a storm and never even got wet, and was now enjoying the clean air. She was making pancakes. From scratch. The flour was dusted across the granite countertop, and the smell of vanilla and melting butter filled the air. She only made pancakes like this when she wanted to be seen as loving, as present. It was a performance of domesticity, a carefully staged production designed to buy my silence and complacency. It was her alibi for the soul. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and just watched for a moment. I watched the practiced, easy movement of her hands as she whisked the batter. I saw the teal silk blouse from last night draped over a kitchen chair, a discarded costume. She was back in her oatmeal sweater, her armor, her at-home uniform. She glanced over her shoulder, not startled this time, but with an easy, radiant grin. The grin of someone in complete control. Morning, sleepyhead. I was wondering when you'd show up. You want strawberries or blueberries on yours? The old Derek, the one from 3 days ago, would have felt a surge of hope. He would have seen the pancakes and the smile as an olive branch, as a sign that the real Mar was back. He would have melted, but the old Derek was dead. He'd been murdered by a winky face emoji and a hotel room number. I uncrossed my arms and returned her smile, matching it beat for beat. Strawberries. I said, my voice as light and warm as the sunlight on the floor. You know me. She laughed, a bright, tinkling sound that now sounded completely hollow. I know. Just checking. You've been in a weird mood. Glad you're back. Glad you're back. The audacity of it. The sheer, breathtaking confidence. She was welcoming me back, as if I had been the one who was lost. Just tired, I said, walking in to help. Long week. It was a dance, and for the first time, I knew all the steps. I played along. I set the table, pouring orange juice into 2 glasses. She plated the food, adding a little flourish of whipped cream, just like she used to when we were first married, and everything felt new. We sat across from each other at the kitchen island, forks and knives clicking against the ceramic. We made small talk. Syrupy, sticky sweet small talk. We talked about the neighbors' obnoxious new wind chimes. We talked about a new show on Netflix everyone was binging. We talked about maybe trying that new Thai place next week, the one she previously said was too far. She looked content, relaxed, and so deeply, profoundly relieved. I could see it in the relaxed set of her shoulders. She believed she was winning. She believed that the storm, my brief, confusing coldness, had passed. The old, passive, forgiving, dull Derek had returned. She didn't notice the difference in my eyes, because I was too busy studying her. I was studying everything. The angle of her smile, the precise way she avoided my gaze for just a fraction of a second too long when she mentioned next week. The slight, almost imperceptible tremor in her hand as she reached for a coffee mug. The only sign of the adrenaline from last night's deceit. I was watching. I was memorizing. I was adding it all to the spreadsheet in my head. The week before, I would have given anything for a breakfast like this easy domestic peace. But now it felt like a costume party, and I was suddenly acutely aware that I had the sharpest, most convincing mask in the room. That afternoon, I told her I was running errands. She'd nodded, already absorbed in her tablet on the couch, her duty as loving wife for the morning complete. I went out, and I bought roses. Not a cheap bouquet from the grocery store. I went to the expensive florist downtown, the one we hadn't used since our anniversary 2 years ago. I bought 12 long-stemmed roses, a deep velvety red. I had the florist wrap them in crisp paper, tied with a silk ribbon. I even bought a card, thick and cream-colored. Inside, I wrote 6 simple words, my handwriting neat and steady. You look beautiful this morning. When I got home, she was still on the couch, lost in her digital world. I walked over and placed the extravagant bouquet in her lap. She physically jolted, her head snapping up, her eyes wide with confusion, so profound it was almost comical. She looked from the roses to my face and back again, her mouth slightly open. "Derek," she whispered, as if I'd just performed a complex magic trick. "For you," I said, smiling gently. She blushed, a deep, genuine blush that spread from her neck to her cheeks. Her eyes, which had been so calculating at breakfast, now looked wide and almost innocent, like she'd just won a bet she didn't even know she placed. "But why?" she asked, her fingers tentatively tracing along the petals. It's not anything." "Does it need to be?" I said, sitting on the coffee table in front of her. "I know I've been distant, stressed with work, and you look so happy this morning, making breakfast. It just reminded me." Her expression melted. The confusion, the suspicion, it all dissolved, replaced by a wave of what I can only describe as smug relief. She smiled that sweet, soft smile I used at the door, and I saw her narrative click into place. Oh, her smile said. He was cold because he was scared of losing me. He was jealous. He knows he's been a bad husband. This is his apology. He's trying to win me back. She leaned forward and kissed me, a soft, dry press of lips. It was the first time she'd initiated any affection in months. "You're really trying," she said sweetly, her voice thick. I smiled, letting my own eyes look earnest and hopeful. "Of course I am. I love you." And the thing was, I was trying. I was trying to see just how deep this illusion went. I was trying to see how easily she'd fall back into the comfortable, self-serving lie that she was the one in control, that our marriage was salvageable, that she could have it all. The rest of the day was like a scene from a movie montage, a grotesque, saccharine montage of a happy couple. We went grocery shopping together. We laughed over a spilled bag of coffee beans in aisle 3. We even shared a bottle of wine while prepping dinner, our hips bumping in the kitchen. She curled up against me on the couch that night, scrolling through Instagram, her head resting on my shoulder just like she used to. Her body was warm, relaxed, and completely unsuspecting. I could feel her breathe, could smell the lingering scent of my roses, and beneath it all, the faint, phantom trace of Corey's hotel room. But behind my calm, quiet, reconciled exterior, my mind kept ticking. She wasn't suspicious. Not anymore. I had neutralized her, and that meant she wasn't smart enough to see what was coming. She thought kindness meant closure. She thought the marriage she had systematically sabotaged could be salvaged by a few pancakes and a guilty kiss. What she didn't understand, what she never saw, was that I had stopped hoping for repair the moment I saw Corey's name. This wasn't reconciliation. This was reconnaissance. She thought I was healing, but really I was sharpening. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of this grotesque, beautiful performance. Our house, which had been a cold tomb, was now a vibrant stage. We were the very picture of a marriage in Renaissance. I was the doting husband, the one who had seen the error of his distant ways. I brought her coffee in the mornings. I asked about her day, about Jasmine and Ben and the niche project, and I listened with a face full of manufactured interest. I initiated movie nights, sitting beside her on the couch, my arm draped casually over her shoulder. And Mara? She blossomed under the attention. She was radiant. The humming became a permanent fixture, the soundtrack to our new, improved life. She was more affectionate than she'd been in a year, touching my arm as she passed, giving me those quick, satisfied smiles. She believed, with every fiber of her being, that she had won. She had successfully navigated her affair, placated her husband with a few pancakes, and was now reaping the rewards of his renewed devotion. She had her cake, and she was eating it, too. And all the while, the SyncGuard app on my phone kept working. Her text to Corey continued, though they were less frequent, more functional. "This week is hard. Let's aim for next. Derek is being so sweet, I feel a little bad. No, still want to. Just need to be careful." She was being careful, not stopping, not remorseful, just careful. She was managing her affair the same way she managed a difficult project at work. And my kindness was just another variable to be managed, a problem she'd solve with a few well-placed smiles and a performance of domesticity. The spreadsheet on my laptop grew, line by line. Then she planned a game night. It was her idea, of course, a way to reintegrate us as a couple into our social circle, a debut of the new Derek. We were to go to our friends Mark and Sarah's house. 2 other couples would be there. Familiar faces, safe territory, a perfect place to put our repaired marriage on display. We arrived, and Mara was glowing, not with real joy, but with performance joy. She was wearing a new dress I hadn't seen, and she held my hand as we walked up the path. She was signaling to everyone. We're back. We're solid. Look how he adores me. I played my part. I was a seasoned actor who had memorized a script. I smiled at the right jokes. I helped Mark with the drinks. I passed the chips. I was attentive to Mara, letting her lean into me on the couch when she laughed, tracing her hand along my arm when no one was looking. I felt it all. I just didn't feel any of it. My warmth was a tactic. My smile was a weapon. We sat in their cozy, oversized living room, surrounded by half-empty wine glasses, bowls of snacks, and easy, uncomplicated laughter couples who still believe in each other, or were at least better at hiding their own lies. After an hour of small talk, Sarah broke out a game. It was one of those ridiculous card games meant to reveal how well couples really knew each other. Who's more likely to leave dishes in the sink? Who takes longer to get ready in the morning? Each card triggered playful nudges, exaggerated groans, and "I told you" from the other couples. But not from us. No, we were poised. Perfect. Predictable. We answered each question with a shared, knowing smile, a performance of 9 years of perfect intimacy. We were a well-oiled, beautiful lie. Until Sarah drew the next card. She smiled, her eyes glinting. Ooh, this is a good one. Okay, Derek, this one's for you to answer first. Who in your relationship is more jealous? The room went quiet, expectant. All eyes turned to me. I felt Mara tense beside me, just a fraction. This was a question that hit a little too close to the narrative she'd built for my weird mood. She was expecting me to say, me, probably, and give her a sheepish, loving look, confirming her theory that my coldness had been born of insecurity. I felt her gaze on me, waiting for me to deliver my line. I didn't. I turned to our friends, my expression open and thoughtful. I let a gentle, almost self-deprecating smile touch my lips, the kind of smile that makes the silence that follows land so much harder. That's a tough one, I said lightly, as if genuinely considering it. But honestly, I don't think I'm the jealous type. I paused, then looked around the room, as if sharing a little secret. If she ever left me, I'd probably just send flowers to her new guy. You know, to thank him for putting up with her. A beat of stunned silence. Then the room erupted. Mark let out a bark of laughter. Sarah slapped her knee. Oh my God, Derek, that's brutal, the other husband, Ben, choked out through his own laugh. It was a perfect joke. It was couched in self-deprecation. It poked fun at Mara in a loving way, and it was completely unexpected from quiet Derek. Everyone laughed. Everyone except Mara. Her smile froze. It didn't just falter. It shattered, the pieces left hanging on her face. Her skin, which had been glowing, went pale. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Her fingers tightened, just a fraction, on the stem of her wine glass. Her knuckles white. Her eyes didn't dart to mine. That would be too obvious. But I could feel her thoughts slamming against the inside of her skull. How did he know? Was that a joke? Why would he say that? He knows. He knows. He knows. That wasn't a joke to her, because it wasn't meant to be. It was a mirror. It was the first surgical crack in the facade. And for the first time in weeks, she was staring at her reflection, and she didn't like what she saw. The game continued. So did the laughter. But her presence had shifted. She was a ghost at the party. Every giggle she forced out after that was just a little too sharp. Every glance she sent my way, when she thought no one was looking, was just a little too quick, a little too frantic. I could feel the air thinning between us, the comfortable warmth of our shared life sucking out of the room. I had done what I came to do. I had taken her safe territory and planted a landmine right in the middle of it, and I had done it with a smile. We were the first to leave. We rode home in silence. The 15-minute drive felt like an eternity. I didn't turn on the radio. The car was a vacuum, sucking all the air out. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, still, cold. I could feel her staring at my profile as I drove, but I didn't look. I just stared straight ahead at the road, my expression neutral, calm. I kept my hands at 10 and 2. I parked the car in the garage. The engine cut off, and the silence that rushed in was deafening. It was thick with things she wanted to say, but couldn't, with questions she was terrified to ask. I didn't move for a second. I just stared straight ahead at the closed garage door. Waited. Eventually, she broke. Why did you say that? Her voice wasn't calm. It wasn't the voice of the woman who had breezily lied about a work dinner. It was small, tight, and trembling. I turned my head slowly, as if pulling myself from a deep thought. I kept my voice neutral, genuinely curious. Say what? The thing, she stammered, her control slipping. About the flowers. For the new guy. That wasn't funny, Derek. It wasn't. I let out a small, confused chuckle, leaning back in my seat. Babe, everyone laughed. Mark almost spit out his wine. It was just a joke. Her voice dropped, becoming sharp, accusatory. I didn't. That silence stretched again. This was it. The shift. She was no longer the one in control of the silence, and it was eating her alive. Why are you acting so weird lately? She finally asked. The question more of an accusation, a desperate attempt to find her footing. I gave her a long look. Not sharp, not cruel, just clear. I let my eyes hold hers in the dim garage light. Weird, I said softly. I'm not acting weird, Mara. I paused, and in that moment, I let the mask of the reconciled husband fall away, replaced by the calm, cold, terrifying clarity I'd been honing for weeks. I'm just finally seeing things clearly. That line didn't explode. It sank, quiet and slow, like a stone dropping into a very deep, very cold lake. I saw the understanding register in her eyes, followed immediately by a wave of pure, undiluted panic. She didn't respond. She just nodded, a tiny, jerky movement. She fumbled for the door handle and stepped out of the car, not slamming the door, but not closing it gently either. Her footsteps echoed across the concrete floor of the garage as she rushed into the house. They didn't sound like the confident click-clack of a woman in charge. They sounded like a warning. The game had changed, and she was, at last, starting to feel it. Something changed after that night. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a slam door or a shouting match. It was like a small crack appearing in a pane of thick glass. You can't unsee it. And you know with absolute certainty that it's only a matter of time before the whole thing shatters. Mara stopped humming in the mornings. That was the first thing I noticed. The silence that replaced it was not the comfortable, operational silence in my office, nor the buzzing, hostile silence of the bedroom. This was a new silence. It was thin, brittle, and charged with suspicion. No soft tunes while she prepped coffee. No under-the-breath singing as she packed her work bag. Just the sharp, isolated sounds of her existence. The click of her mug on the granite. The zip of her laptop case. The tap of her spoon as she stirred her yogurt. She watched me. The tables had turned completely. I'd catch her staring while I buttered my toast or laced up my shoes for the gym. It wasn't the loving kind of stare. It was the calculating, assessing kind. The kind of look you give a dog you suspect might finally be sick of its chain. She was trying to figure out who I'd become. She was trying to read the unreadable, to find a foothold in the new, smooth, impassive surface I presented. But she never asked directly about the flowers common again. She knew she couldn't. She had no ground to stand on, and she knew it. So, instead, she tried to reassert control in the only way she knew how, by trying to catch me. You're spending a lot of time on your phone lately, she said one night. We were on the couch, a rerun of some home design show playing on the TV, filling the dead air between us. I was scrolling through my own emails, pointedly ignoring the SyncGuard app. I didn't look up. So are you. That stopped her cold. It was the simple, undeniable truth. She sat beside me in silence, her fingers picking at a loose thread on a throw pillow. Her body was faced toward the TV, but her attention, her entire being, was fixed squarely on me. I could feel the heat of her scrutiny. Is there someone? She finally asked. Her voice was careful, almost casual, but the question was a lead balloon. It was the question she was dying to ask. It was the only explanation that would make sense in her world. It would, in a sick way, almost make her feel better. It would make us even. It would make my coldness a simple, understandable case of an eye for an eye. I let the question linger, let the silence of the room stretch and pull it taut. Then I slowly looked over at her. I didn't look angry. I didn't look guilty. I just looked curious. And I smiled. Not the warm, reassuring smile of the reconciled husband. Not the cold, thin smile of the grocery store parking lot. This was a new one. Gentle, but completely, terrifyingly unreadable. Why would you ask that, Mara? She faltered. Her eyes darted from mine, and she gave a small, unconvincing laugh. I don't know. You're just different. Distant. I nodded, as if considering her words. So are you. Her throat moved, a visible swallow. She was about to say something, to argue, to deny, but the words didn't arrive. She just stared, as if trying to identify a stranger who had stolen her husband's face. And I let her. I let her sit in an agonizing, ambiguous discomfort. The same discomfort she had made me live in for months. The next day, I dropped the bomb. I was packing an overnight bag in the bedroom. Just a few essentials. She was standing in the doorway, that watchful, assessing look on her face. "I have a business trip," I said, not looking at her, folding a shirt with crisp precision. "A trip?" she asked immediately. Her voice was sharp, too quick. "When?" "Tomorrow," I said. "3 nights. I'll be back Sunday." Three nights," she stammered. "Where?" "You didn't mention this." "Came up suddenly. Just upstate." I said, zipping the bag. "Project review." I didn't offer a city. I didn't offer a hotel name. I didn't offer a client. "Oh." She was trying to sound casual, but the panic in her eyes was undeniable. "Well, will you be able to talk? Should I call you at the hotel?" I finally looked at her. I gave her that same gentle, unreadable smile. "Probably not. It's going to be packed. Long days. I'll be working remotely in the evenings, too. Probably won't have much time to check in. Don't wait up." I watched her face as I said it, as I fed her back her exact lines. The "don't wait up" landed with the precision of a scalpel. I saw the flash of recognition. I saw the blood drain from her face. She knew what I was doing. I was using her script. I was mirroring her. She tried to hide it, forcing a smile, nodding, making some joke about finally getting to bed to herself. But it didn't land. Her laugh was too tight, her hands too still. Because deep down she felt it. This wasn't about work. This was about the flowers comment. This was about seeing things clearly. This was something shifting, irrevocably out of her control. When I left that Friday morning, suitcase in hand, she kissed me on the cheek. Her lips were cold. Her body was rigid. It was a forced, desperate gesture of normalcy. "Text when you get there," she said, her voice thin. I nodded. "Will do." And I didn't. I didn't drive upstate. I drove 30 minutes across the bridge to a sleek, minimal, boutique hotel in the next city over. The kind of place with exposed concrete walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, and an anonymous, transient vibe. I checked in under my own name. I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't available. The room was clean, quiet. I unpacked slowly. I hung my shirts in the closet, arranged my toiletries on a marble sink, as if I'd be staying longer than I was. I ordered room service, a steak and a glass of expensive bourbon. I sat by the window, watching the city lights blur and twinkle from my 14th-floor perch. And I didn't text. Not that night. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and set it on the nightstand. I watched a movie. I took a long, hot shower. I slept for the first time in months like a rock. The next morning, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls, all from Mara. For text, 8:15 p.m. "Hey, just text when you get there." 9:30 p.m. "Drive okay?" 11:05 p.m. "Derek, just let me know you're safe." 1:12 a.m. "Are you screening my calls?" I didn't reply. The silence wasn't a punishment. It was a mirror. It was a vacuum. And I knew she'd eventually have to look into it, to try and fill it. I spent the day walking around a city I barely knew. I went to a museum. I drank coffee in a crowded cafe, surrounded by strangers, and felt more at peace than I had in my own home in a year. By the second night, Saturday, my phone was a near-constant barrage of vibrations. I let it go. Finally, a voicemail notification popped up. I let it sit for an hour. Then, as I nursed another bourbon in my quiet, sterile room, I played it. "Hey, it's me. Again." Her voice. It wasn't a confident, humming voice. It wasn't a sharp, accusatory voice. It was small. It was thin. And it was terrified. I'm just checking in. I guess you're really busy." A nervous laugh that was half a sob. I don't know why you're not answering. I'm getting worried. Hope everything's going okay. Call me when you can. Please." Her voice cracked, just slightly on the last sentence. I played the message twice. Not out of sympathy, not out of cruelty, but to hear the shift, to hear the quiet, curling fear that had rooted itself beneath her words. It was the exact same fear I had once swallowed in the dark, night after night, staring at the drywall, wondering why the woman I loved wouldn't touch me. It was the anxiety, the self-doubt, the gnawing dread. It was no longer mine. I had packaged it up and mailed it back to her. No, this wasn't punishment. This was reciprocity. It was hers to hold now. When I returned home Sunday evening, the house was spotless. Too spotless. It was the kind of clean that screams panic. The air, usually just neutral, was thick with the scent of lemon polish and beeswax. Candles, dozens of them, were lit in every room, casting a flickering, funereal glow. A playlist was humming softly through the living room speakers. Something acoustic and melancholy, the kind of music meant to stage a memory we'd never actually had. This wasn't a home. This was a shrine to a life she was desperately trying to prove still existed. I stepped to the front door, my key quiet in the lock. I felt like a stranger returning to an Airbnb, my suitcase rolling softly on the hardwood. Mara was standing in the hallway, halfway between the living room and the kitchen. She wasn't casually there. She was waiting. She had clearly been listening for the sound of my car for hours. Her face broke into a smile that was just a second too delayed, a fraction too wide. Her eyes were bright but puffy, as if she'd spent the morning crying and the afternoon covering it up. "You're back," she breathed, her voice high and thin. "You're early." I didn't smile back. I just nodded, pulling my suitcase over the threshold. Beat traffic. She rushed forward, her hands fluttering, reaching for my bag. It was a gesture so out of character, so performatively subservient, it made me pause. "Here, let me get that. You must be exhausted." "I've got it," I said calmly, sidestepping her reach and passing her without a glance. I walked toward the kitchen, her desperate energy radiating off her like a bad perfume. She followed me, of course, hovering a few feet behind. The scent of rosemary and thyme filled the air, rich and savory. A roast, one of my old favorites. I stopped at the kitchen island, placing my keys in the bowl. Mara was already at the stove, stirring a pot with rehearsed, frantic ease, like a contestant in a cooking show who was minutes in the deadline, and had just realized she'd forgotten a key ingredient. "How was the trip?" she asked, her back to me. "Was it productive?" "Productive?" I echoed, my voice flat. I opened the fridge and pulled out a bottle of water. She set the spoon down, the clack against the ceramic stovetop echoing too loudly in the stage silence. She turned, leaning against the counter, wringing a dish towel in her hands. You didn't call," she said, trying to make it sound like a casual observation, not the accusation that was eating her alive. I twisted the cap off the water, took a long, slow drink. "I was busy," I said, like I said I'd be. She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the dish towel in her hands. The silence that followed was an agreement. It was containment. She was visibly swallowing questions, burying them under that forced, bright smile, unsure which version of me would answer as she asked. We ate dinner like two diplomats at a peace summit, polite, composed, and utterly careful. The table was set with the good china. More candles flickered between us. She asked about the hotel. I described the view. She asked if I met the clients in person. I said most of it was digital. She smiled. I smiled. In between us at a meal she prepared not out of love, but out of pure, unadulterated desperation. It was a peace offering from someone who'd only just begun to realize the war had started months ago, and she'd already lost significant ground. Every bite I took felt like I was swallowing her fear. After dinner, I excused myself. "I'm going to take a long shower." "Oh," she said, starting to gather the plates. "Okay, I'll be in the bedroom." The hot water pounded against my back as I leaned into tile wall, eyes closed. The steam filled the glass enclosure, blotting out the world. I listened to nothing but the echo of the running water and my own calm, steady breathing. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not really. I didn't feel joy. I just felt distant, removed. I felt the same sterile peace I'd felt in the hotel room. And that distance, that magnificent, fortified distance, it no longer scared me. It was the only thing that felt real. When I returned to the bedroom, wrapped in a towel, she was already under the covers. Just as I had predicted, her phone was in her hand, the screen casting that familiar blue glow on her face. She was pretending to scroll, her thumb moving mechanically over the glass. But I knew she wasn't reading a thing. I dried off, pulled on a pair of sweatpants, and climbed into bed. Not too close, not too far. Just there. The light from her screen made her face look older, tired. Her fingers hovered over her phone, as if she didn't know who to text or what she could possibly even say. Eventually, with a small, shaky sigh, she turned the phone off and placed it on the nightstand. The room plunged into near darkness, lit only by the faint moonlight from the window. She waited. I waited. Finally, her voice, small and trembling, cut through the dark. "I missed you," she whispered. I stayed perfectly still. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. It was a test. A final, desperate plea for the old Derek to return, to reassure her, to absolve her. I turned my head on the pillow to look at her silhouette. Did you? I asked, my voice quiet, neutral, holding neither accusation nor affection. I heard her breath hitch, a tiny, sharp intake of air. Yes, she said, her voice cracking. Of course I did. She waited for me to respond, for me to say, I missed you too. I didn't. I just turned my head back to the ceiling, because I wasn't sure if I missed her, or just a version of me who once thought this woman, this house, this life, was my home, and I was no longer interested in lying. I woke early the next morning. The bed beside me was warm, but it was empty. I wasn't surprised. After last night, after I'd met her whisper desperate, I miss you with a cold, analytical did you? And an ocean of silence, I knew she wouldn't have stayed. The tension in that bed had become a physical thing, a solid wall between us. She hadn't just gotten up to use the bathroom. She had fled. I lay there for a minute, staring at the gray morning light filtering through the blinds. The house was utterly still. The silence was different again. It wasn't the brittle, suspicious silence of the days before my trip. This was a dead silence. A vacuum. The silence of a held breath, of an entire life poised on the edge of a cliff. My own breathing was calm, steady. I felt rested. That cold, sterile piece I'd found in the hotel room had followed me home. It was like a suit of armor. I was no longer a participant in this drama. I was the audience. I was the critic, and I was waiting for the final act. I got up, pulled on a t-shirt, and followed the scent of coffee to the kitchen. It wasn't the rich, inviting aroma of a fresh pot. It was a stale, scorched smell of a pot that had been on for hours, the coffee inside slowly turning to tar. She was there. She was standing at the counter, her back to the doorway, wearing the same robe she'd had on when I returned last night. It was an old, faded burgundy plush thing, a gift from her mother years ago. It used to be a symbol of our cozy, lazy Sundays. Now it just looked sad, stained. She was gripping a coffee mug with both hands, so tightly her knuckles were white. She wasn't drinking. She was just holding it, as if for warmth, or as if it were the only solid thing in the room. She hadn't heard me. She was staring out the kitchen window at the bleak, gray backyard, lost. But this wasn't the smug, satisfied, lost in thought of her humming days. This was a terrified lost of someone who realizes they have no map, no compass, and the sun is going down. I leaned against the doorframe. Morning, I said, my voice, calm and rested, cut through the dead air like a knife. She flinched, a violent, full-body jolt, and spun around. A slosh of black coffee spilled over the rim of her mug, scalding her hand. Shit, she hissed, dropping the mug into the sink, where it shattered on impact. She stood there, breathing heavily, staring at the broken ceramic, not even registering the hot coffee dripping from her fingers. Mara, I said, my voice still neutral. You're bleeding. She looked down at her hand, at the small cut on her index finger from a shard of the mug, as if she didn't even recognize it as her own. She turned on the tap, ran her hand under the cold water, her movements jerky and robotic. I walked past her, got a mug from the cabinet, and poured myself a cup of the scorched coffee. I didn't help her. I didn't get the first aid kit. I just watched. She grabbed a paper towel, wrapped it clumsily around her hand, and turned to face me, leaning back against the sink. Her armor was gone. The thinking sweater, the performance joy, the radiant wife, all of it had been incinerated. Her face was a wreck. It was pale, blotchy, and puffy. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She hadn't just been crying. She hadn't slept. This was the face of a person who had spent 8 hours staring into the abyss she created, and had finally seen it staring back. She had been waiting for me. Morning, she finally said, her voice a hoarse, cracked whisper. I nodded, took a sip of the bitter coffee, and leaned against the opposite counter, mirroring her. We were two soldiers on opposite sides of a DMZ. The kitchen island our dividing line. She hesitated. I could see the war in her eyes. I could see her cycling through 1,000 different scripts, 1,000 different approaches. Anger? Pleading? Accusation? She was trying to find the one that would work, the one that would get the old Derek back. You seemed off last night. She finally landed on the weakest of openers. I took another sip. I'm tired, I said. The same line, the same bland, unassailable wall. No. Her voice was stronger, a flash of the old, defiant Mara. That's not all. She pushed off the sink, the paper towel clutched in her fist. It's not just last night. It's been ever since that game night. You're distant, Derek. You're different. You're cold. I looked at her over the rim of my mug. I let her words hang in the air, let her hear them. Let her hear how they sounded. I asked, genuinely curious. That's when she broke. My calm, my simple, two-letter question was the one thing she couldn't handle. Yes, she cried, her voice cracking, rising with a frantic, desperate energy. You are. You know you are. You go on this trip. A trip you never told me about. You don't call. You ignore me for 2 days. I was busy. I interjected, my voice flat. And you come back and you look at me like I'm a stranger. Her voice hitched. Like you don't even know me. Like you hate me. I stayed silent. I let her spiral. Her own words fill in the vacuum. She was pacing now, a small trap circle between the sink and the fridge. I think, she continued, her voice trembling but gaining a desperate momentum. We need to talk. I just nodded, setting my mug down on the counter with a quiet click. Okay, talk. My agreement, my absolute stillness. Through her, she had been prepared for me to argue, to deny, to shut down, to yell. She was prepared for a fight. She was not prepared for this autopsy. She had to force out the next part, her hands twisting the paper towel, her eyes darting around the room, unable to land on me. I don't know what's going on with you, she stammered. You've been weird and on your phone all the time. And this trip, she took a deep, shaky breath. This was it. The accusation she'd been building in her mind for 2 weeks. The only narrative that made any sense to her. The only narrative that would, in some sick way, absolve her. Her only defense was to attack. Are you seeing someone? The question hung there, trembling between us. It was a pathetic, desperate thing. A final, flailing attempt to find a story that wasn't about her. She wanted me to say yes. I saw it in her eyes. It was a plea. Please, tell me you're cheating. Tell me we're the same. Tell me this is just a base, transactional betrayal. Not whatever this cold, terrifying thing is. It would make her a victim, or at least an equal participant in mutual destruction. I looked down into my coffee cup, at the black, oily surface. I let the silence stretch. 10 seconds. 15. I could hear her ragged breathing. The small, wet sound of her trying to hold back a sob. Finally, I looked up at her. I didn't smile the unreadable smile. I didn't smile the cold smile. I let my face show only a profound, bottomless pity. And I knew in that instant that pity was so much worse than anger. It was the ultimate dismissal. No, Mara, I said gently, I'm not seeing anyone. Her face crumpled. It was a physical collapse. Her shoulders slumped, her head bowed, and a small, wounded sound escaped her throat. This was the worst possible answer. If I wasn't cheating, then my coldness, my distance, my entire transformation, it was just about her. There was no one else to blame. The mirror was reflecting only her. Then why? She whispered, her voice breaking, the tears finally coming hot and angry. Why are you doing this? Why are you being so cruel? Cruel. I repeated the word in my head, tasting it. I pushed off the counter, my calm finally, decisively, shifting, not to anger, to precision. Cruel? I said, my voice quiet, but with an edge she hadn't heard before. You think this is cruel? Me being quiet? Me going on a trip for 2 days? Me not answering my phone when I'm busy? I set my mug down on the counter, the clack of the ceramic on the granite, as loud as a gunshot in the still room. But thank you for asking, I said, my voice dropping, losing all its pity, replaced by that ice-cold, logistical clarity. It's an interesting question. Derek, she started, her eyes wide with a new, sharper fear. She had wanted a fight, and she was realizing too late that she had just brought a knife to a nuclear war. It's a really interesting question, coming from you. I continued, taking a step toward her. She instinctively took a step back, hitting the sink. You want to know why? Why I'm distant? Why I'm different? Let's talk about it. I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. Let's talk about why you haven't let me touch you in 6 months. Let's talk about not tonight. Let's talk about I'm tired. Let's talk about work stress. Let's talk about the humming, Mara. Let's talk about the goddamn humming. She stopped breathing. Her hand, the one not wrapped in a bloody paper towel, flew to her mouth. Her eyes were wide, a look of pure, unadulterated terror. "Oh," I said, faking a sudden realization. "You didn't want to talk about that. You just want to know if I was a bad guy. You just want to find an excuse for you, a way to make us even." I don't," she stammered, shaking her head, backing away from me, her hand gripping the counter's edge. I don't know what you're talking about." The lie was so weak, so pathetic. It was almost insulting. I shook my head, a look of profound, sad disappointment on my face. "You're not ready to talk, Mara. You're just ready to accuse." I turned my back to her. The conversation was over. The autopsy was complete. "I'm going to my office," I said, my voice flat again, the ice receding, leaving only the cold, hard certainty. "Derek, wait!" she cried, her voice a panicky sob. Don't you walk away from me." I paused in the kitchen doorway, but I didn't turn around. I just stopped. "Why not?" I said to the empty hallway. "You've been walking away from me for a year. You just did it with a smile." I left her there, alone in the wreckage of her kitchen, surrounded by broken ceramic and the stench of burnt coffee. I left her in the silence she had so carefully, so cruelly built for me. And now, finally, she was choking on it. The Monday that followed was a day of absolute, agonizing silence. After I had left her in the kitchen, a broken wreck amid the shards of her coffee mug, I went to my office. I didn't slam the door. I closed it, and she must have heard the soft, final click of the lock. It was the first time I had ever locked it. That sound, that tiny metallic snap, was the real end. I sat at my desk. My heart wasn't pounding. My hands weren't shaking. I felt nothing but a vast, cold, operational calm. The confrontation I had dreaded for months was over, and I had survived. I had, in fact, prevailed. I opened my phone, not my laptop. I opened SyncGuard, and I watched. The text to Corey started almost immediately. She was still in the kitchen, her back against the sink, her hand probably still wrapped in that bloody paper towel. "Mara, 8:12 a.m. he knows. Mara, 8:12 a.m. I don't know how. He knows everything. Mara, 8:13 a.m. he said not tonight. He said the humming. He knows. Corey, 8:15 a.m. what? What did you tell him? Mara, 8:15 a.m. nothing. I didn't tell him anything. He confronted me and then he just walked away. Mara, 8:16 a.m. he locked himself in his office. He won't talk to me. Corey, 8:18 a.m. shit. Okay, just stay calm. He's probably just suspicious. He has no proof. I stared at that last message. He has no proof. A small, thin smile touched my lips. I closed the app. I opened my laptop. I opened the encrypted file, details at XLSX. Then I opened my email and began to methodically, clinically, attach the screenshots, the location logs, and the chat transcripts to a new draft. The rest of the day was a siege. The house was a tomb, and I was the only one with a key. Around noon, she knocked. A soft, hesitant, pathetic sound. Tap, tap, tap. "Derek." Her voice was hoarse, wrecked from crying. "Derek, please. We have to talk about this. Please open the door." I didn't answer. I just continued to type. I heard her lean her forehead against the door, her breathing shaky and wet. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. Please." Her apology was a thin, useless currency. I didn't move. After another minute, I heard her footsteps, a slow, defeated shuffle as she walked away. She texted me from 30 feet away. "Mara, 2:45 p.m. I can't do this. This silence is killing me. Mara, 2:46 p.m. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please just talk to me. Mara, 2:46 p.m. I love you." I read the text. I felt the vibration of the last one, the "I love you," and it felt like a sting. I didn't reply. Night fell. I didn't emerge. The house was dark. I heard her, hours later, walk to the bedroom. Alone. I slept on the small, uncomfortable couch in my office, and it was the most peaceful night's sleep I'd had in a year. On Tuesday morning, I woke at 6 a.m. I unlocked the office door, went to the guest bathroom, showered, and shaved. I put on a crisp, dark suit. I was not going to work. I was going to a meeting with my lawyer, and then to the bank, and then to a notary. I was executing a plan. When I emerged, she was at the kitchen table, in the same robe, her face a gray, hollow mask. She looked up as I entered, her eyes wide with a new terror. The suit. Derek, she croaked. Where were you going? I paused at the counter, poured myself a glass of water, and drank it slowly. I looked at her, my eyes as flat and hard as slate. To finish this, I said. Then I turned, picked up my briefcase, and walked out the front door, not looking back as she cried out my name. Tuesday evening, she came home to silence. Not the awkward, simmering silence we had been dancing with for weeks. Not the heavy, charged silence of the previous 36 hours. This was a silence carved clean and deliberate. A silence that was absolute. The house was holding its breath. The candles I had seen her light on Sunday were now just cold, waxy pools on their saucers. The air was stale, still holding the phantom, sour scent of the roast she had made, a meal for a man who was never coming back. The lights were low. The house felt empty, a void. On the kitchen table, under the soft, solitary hum of the overhead lamp, sat a single, thick manila envelope. It wasn't tossed. It was placed, perfectly centered. On it, in my precise, blocky handwriting, was one word, Mara. She stepped forward slowly, her hand outstretched, as if approaching a coffin or a small, sleeping animal she was afraid to wake. Her fingers trembled. She touched the corner, then recoiled, as if it had burned her. She took a breath, then picked it up. It was heavy. She opened the envelope, fumbling with the clasp. Inside, the divorce papers. Thick, creamy, expensive stock paper, neatly organized. She pulled them out. The top page was a simple petition. In the matter of the dissolution of the marriage between Derek Harrison and Mara Harrison. She stared at the words, her mind unable to make them rearrange themselves into something less final. This wasn't a talk. This wasn't a fight. This was a transaction. She flipped to the last page, and she saw it. My name, there in black ink. My signature, precise, unshaken, confident. And beside it, the blank line, waiting for her, respondent. It was an invitation to join a story she didn't even think would reach this chapter. Her lips parted, maybe to speak, maybe to deny, but no one was listening. Derek, she called out, her voice a thin whisper. The hallway behind her stretched long and empty. Derek, she called louder, a note of rising panic in her voice. Her voice echoed off the walls. The house, her accomplice in so many small deceits, didn't respond. She dropped the papers on the table and ran. She ran through each room, a frantic ghost hunting for the man she used control. Our bedroom. She flung open the closet. My side was empty. Every shirt, every suit, every pair of shoes gone. The wooden hangers hung in a neat, mocking row. My office. The laptop was gone. The hard drives gone. The notebooks gone. The patio. The guest room. He hadn't just left. He had excised himself. He had surgically removed every trace of his existence from this home, leaving nothing but the stage props she had arranged. By the time she made it back to the kitchen, her hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold her phone. She picked it up, dialed, straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She texted, her thumbs clumsy, mashing the keys. Where are you? You can't just leave. Derek, this isn't fair. We can fix this. We can talk. Please. The blue bubble turned green. Her messages were no longer delivered. They weren't even sending. He had already blocked her. For the first time in all her carefully choreographed months of secrecy and lies, Mara had no script left to follow. No clever cover story, no smug upper hand, only absence. She sank into a kitchen chair, staring at the papers. And that's when she saw it. There was a second envelope inside the first. A plain, white business envelope she had missed. She opened it. There was no note, no letter, just printouts. The first page was a spreadsheet, titled Details. Column A, Date. Column B, Alibi Provided. Column C, Actual Location. Column D, Contact. Column E, Evidence. She saw the lines. October 20th, Girls' Night. Location, the Grandview Hotel. Contact, Corey. Evidence, see tab 1. November 5th, work dinner thing. Location, the Grandview Hotel. Contact, Corey. Evidence, see tab 2. Her blood ran cold. She fumbled with the other pages. They were screenshots. Her text, missed our little lunch escape today. Room 237 again tonight. You warm it up, babe. Wrapping up a Zoom call. Be there in 20. Page after page. The location pings from my trip, showing her at the hotel. The hotel folio from the Grandview, downloaded from her email account, charged to a credit card I didn't even know she had. She finally, truly understood. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't a husband's jealousy. This was an investigation. This was a prosecution. This was an act of man in pain. It was a calculated, precise maneuver of a man who had stopped feeling pain weeks ago. The divorce papers weren't a threat. They were a summary. She sank to the floor, her legs giving out, the paper scattered around her on the cold tile, a perfect, damning mosaic of her lies. That night, I checked into a short-term rental on the other side of town. Clean, sparse, temporary, but it felt more like home than the one I just left behind. I didn't need to look at my phone. I knew she'd spiral. I knew she'd unravel. She thought this would end with a fight, with me begging, shouting, throwing accusations she could cry over and deny. But I had given her nothing, not even my shadow. This ending wasn't loud. It was surgical. Finality doesn't need noise to make itself known. And that's exactly what those papers were. Finality, dressed in ink and consequence.